chapter 11. We'll be starting in verse 12 and running through 26. That's Mark chapter 11, starting in 12. And the word of the Lord reads, "On the following day, when they came from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing in the distance a fig tree and leaf, he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, 'May no one ever eat fruit from you again.' And his disciples heard it." It's the preface to our story. It's a very basic start. You can imagine. The disciples and Jesus had just arrived in Jerusalem. They stay in Bethany, right outside of Jerusalem. And, after any length of a trip, one tends to get hungry. Maybe just a little snack, a little something. It doesn't seem like Jesus is famished, but he just has that, for want of a better word, craving. Just enough to tide him over, something slightly sweet. Maybe wanting just a little kick of energy from the natural sugars. And he sees off in some distance the outline of a fig tree. Now, I have to admit, I really never had a fig until I was about 30, 31. And so I really never got the pull, the excitement, the desire. But you see, I ended up in a part of the world where that's a common dessert, and you put just a little bit of cream on top of that, and that's some good eating. Jesus sees it. He desires it. As he gets closer, and as he gets up to the tree, he looks it over, and there is no fruit. Nothing. Now, I'm not saying this was a goal. I'm not saying this was on his bucket list. I'm not saying this was his dream. But he is left wanting. I also believe his next words were not out of anger. They weren't out of spite. But they were something that we should hear clearly, because we've been told close to the same as a fig tree. He looked at it and he stated, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And he said it loud enough that the 12 heard him. Now, we don't know exactly what's going through the 12's mind. Maybe they're thinking, hey, he's had a bad day. He's hungry. It didn't work. He's just letting off some steam. Oh, if they only knew what was coming next. You see, fig trees have a purpose. Now, it's not a miraculous purpose. It is not really a purpose that serves through all of eternity. It has a simple, basic purpose. A fig tree is to produce figs. And this particular one, that particular day, was not meeting its purpose. And Jesus calls all things to their purpose. He doesn't loiter there long. After all, they've made this journey from Capernaum to Jerusalem with a reason. The Passover is coming. So they do what they logically should be doing. They make their way to the heart of the city, to the temple. And they came to Jerusalem. And he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold and those who bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. And he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. And he was teaching them and saying to them, "Is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations? But you have made it a den of robbers." And the chief priests and the scribes heard it. And they were seeking a way to destroy him, for they feared him, because all the crowd was astonished at his teaching. And when evening came, they went out of the city. They come to the temple. It's the Passover. One of the most holy and traditional periods in Jerusalem. You know, something like Christmas. The lights were out, the displays were there. There was an excitement in the air. And Jesus enters the temple. Now, you have to realize, when I say the temple, I don't know what your thoughts are. I don't know how quickly you run to an accurate understanding of what it is, or if you compare it to coming to church. Well, the temple's much bigger than our church. It had courts. Hear that in our day as sanctuaries. There was the main sanctuary, where you are now. And Jewish males would fill the area. It was highly select who could get in. By the law and by their understanding, only practicing Jewish males were allowed in this area. Now, back beyond, behind the joy class, behind the parlor, back there in our parking lot, well, there's the court of the Gentiles. That's where anyone who is not a Jewish male could begin to approach. These are seeking Gentiles, maybe following Gentiles. They're not quite allowed into the presence of God, but they're allowed to see it happening. And right around there is the court of the women. They too are allowed to come fairly close, but not in communion with. Always at an arm's length. You see out there? There, some entrepreneurs thought, I have a great idea. For Passover, people are traveling far distances to come to Jerusalem and worship God. And on that last day, there's to be sacrifices. And if they're coming a long way, it's going to be really hard for them to bring their bull or their pigeon or their goat. I mean, pigeons have a tendency to fly off. I hear goats can be really stubborn animals. And we won't even begin to discuss. Can you imagine? Can you imagine taking a bull from, I don't know, Richmond to Nashville? That would be all kinds of fun. So someone got the great idea, how about if we sell them right here? It'll help the weary travelers. They'll be able to exchange their money. We'll be able to determine the rates. And they can buy good, pure, acceptable sacrifices from us. Now, where would be the best spot to do this? Well, if we did it across the street, we run the risk of missing some people. Hey, why don't we set it up right in the middle of the court of the Gentiles? After all, they're not Jewish. They're dirty. They're unacceptable. They're not special in God's eyes. We'll put it right there. The temple's purpose was for prayer and for worship. Let me ask you, how do you best pray? Do you have your best prayer times when you're away from the world? Maybe in your bedroom? Maybe another area of the house, or maybe in the car driving to or from work, everything relatively quiet, everything relatively serene. Is it easier to speak to God in those moments? Or would it be better to do that in the middle of a large party? You know, with a band playing in the background and people yelling all around you and everyone else really getting into what's going on. Are those the times that you can unburden your heart to God? Now, perhaps you do need to pray for being at that party, but that's another story. Most of us are much more focused on God and worship and His holiness when all of that is gone and it's quiet and serene. These Gentile believers have no option. There is nowhere else for them to go. They are required to be there. And let's throw a couple thousand bulls and pigeons and goats. Can you smell it? Can you hear it? Not only that, you have the money changers that are taking the outside money and getting it exchanged for temple money so these animals can be purchased. Can you imagine the haggling going on? Can you imagine that one weary traveler who left his visa at home, even though he has heard, do not leave home without it? And he's running short and he's nervous. And the bellowing continues and the smells waft. Are you worshiping yet, church? Not only that, there was another interesting feature that the temple had. The court of the Gentiles was actually on a principal road. Now, you know, it's kind of blocked off, but a main street ran right at that area. So oftentimes people, in order to save some time, would cut through the temple. No desire to be there. They just needed to get to the other side of town. Well, we'll just scurry on through. No one will care. No one will know. It's safe to say that distractions were many. And this is the biggest time of year. More people are there than normal. It would be safe to say that area would be chaotic. And Jesus and the 12 enter. And you remember what I said about Jesus and his desire for purpose? He walks in and he sees this sight. Not sure which came first, heartbrokenness or righteous anger. But they both had to be there. And Jesus does what God does. He walks into the court of Gentiles and he starts tossing tables. Can you see it? Can you imagine it? Doesn't stop there. He starts picking up chairs and tossing them. Nothing has ever been done like this in the history of the temple. This out-of-towner is coming in and he is wrecking it. Or at least what they viewed as wrecking it. He makes only one declaration. My house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations. Did you hear that? Not even those entrepreneurs would have the audacity to do it in the temple proper. Just another way to say, you all aren't good enough for us. You're not worth anything more than these live, stinky, out-of-control animals. A house of prayer for all nations. I mean, the majority of those Gentiles had come to worship. To hear about the God Most High, who had called them to this place for this time. And they couldn't fully be absorbed into that holy community because of the craziness all around. As chairs and tables go flying, so do the baskets of money. Now, if you want to get someone's attention, start throwing their money around. You'll get it. It says the Sadducees and the chief priests hear of it, and they're not happy. Doesn't exactly say why they're not happy. Were they getting a cut? Did they feel this was inappropriate because it disturbed the service? Of all of those who should have understood the purpose of the temple, it was them, and they missed it, and they had allowed it to continue week after week, year after year. They were fine with the distractions. In fact, not only were they fine with them, they had to approve of them for them to remain. So the very religious leaders who should be bringing people into a greater relationship with God was really causing their focus to be lost. Was doing all that they could to benefit themselves, to insulate themselves from those people. I think it's safe to say no one would have left the temple that day without remembering what went on. Jesus' expectations were high. Meet your purpose. Live it out. Don't be a stumbling block. Night comes and Jesus and the 12 start to leave. Back to Bethany where they're staying. They have a night's sleep, and they're ready to come back to the city again. And as they passed by in the morning, they saw the fig tree withered away to its roots. And Peter remembered and said to him, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed is withered." We're going to stop there. They were just going back to town. I'm sure the 12 weren't expecting any great religious treaty on anything. Passover was coming. That kind of thing would happen in Jerusalem when they got there. And they passed by that fig tree. And it is withered. Mark says to the roots, it is a total and complete hopelessness, death. It won't be revived. There's no missing it. And for some reason, Peter's amazed. He looks at it. Jesus, the tree you cursed, it's dead. Hear that? Why is it dead? Because Jesus cursed it. Why did Jesus curse it? It wasn't fulfilling its purpose. There were no figs. Fig trees are to produce fruit, and more specifically, figs. Wasn't happening. Jesus didn't tolerate it. A day later, it is dead. Now, I'm probably stretching this here, but please forgive me. And I say that because when we read about the disciples in the New Testament, they do not tend to be the most intuitive bunch. They don't tend to connect the dots very well. They tend to miss the bigger picture for the little glimpse of something. But for some sneaky reason, maybe it's the next verse, I feel like they connected these dots. The fig tree is dead because it didn't meet its purpose, and Jesus cursed it. And later that day, he was in the temple, and let's face it, turning over tables and launching chairs is a curse. This tree is dead. What shall be of the people who do not live according to their purpose? I hear Peter saying that. And Jesus answered them, have faith in God. The disciples saw the problems. A tree, a people, not being who they were called to be, not living up to their potential, not operating at the standard. And Jesus says nothing more than have faith in God. God is the answer to every problem, every dilemma that we as humans will face. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for him. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Now, it's important that we realize who Jesus is talking to here. He is not talking about your run-of-the-mill person who shows up at temple. He is not talking to people who don't know their purpose. He is not talking to Johnny-come-latelys who have just shown up. He's talking to the 12 who he has invested 3 years in. He has proclaimed to them that he is going to Jerusalem, really not to celebrate the Passover, but to lay down his life that we might live. They have a picture of salvation, a picture of evangelism, and a picture of mission in their mind and in their hearts. They have lived with Jesus. They know he is not concerned about getting the best camel available in the lot. They know he is not concerned with how many denarii are in their pockets. He is concerned about the eternal soul. So when he says, you pray, and if you pray and you believe it without doubt and sincerity, those mountains will crumble if you ask for it. He is not saying that we get every desire of our heart. He is saying when you are focused on the right things and you are living up to your purpose, God will move mountains. Therefore, I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. And whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father also who is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. Hear that? Have faith in God and forgive liberally. But what if they were really ugly to me? I mean, just as ugly as they could be. Forgive. But no, you don't understand. They went out of their way to be ugly to me. Forgive. But you don't know how rotten and disturbing and downright conniving. And they have no interest in following you, God. Surely now I can forgive. You see, I think Jesus also wanted to make it abundantly clear, because he had cursed a fig tree. He had, for all intent and purpose, cursed the temple. Our job is not to judge, that is his. We are to be a forgiving people. We understand the circumstances, we understand the situation, but our purpose tells us that we reach out in love and mercy and offer salvation. Church, in this day where dog eats dog, where everybody believes they have the right to do as they please, do we forgive? Is there a grudge you're harboring? See, we can't find Jesus allowing that in Scripture. Even if we believe we have righteous anger, and righteously Jesus overturned the tables and tossed the chairs, you know what, folks? We don't do righteous anger properly. You know why? We always have an axe to grind. We're not upset that they did that. We're upset what happened to us because they did that. Forgive. So we enter the Christmas season. I can assure you, you will have plenty of opportunity to forgive people. The person that steals your parking spot at the mall, forgive. The waitress who has to come over and tell you that person just ordered the last whatever it is you ordered, forgive. But what if they forget me entirely? They don't invite me to their party and they don't have a gift for me. Forgive. Our purpose is to bring people closer to Christ, to be able to share who he is and what he has done in our lives. We know Jesus deals harshly with those items and people who do not live up to their purpose. Don't be one. As our folks lead us, won't you stand and